welcome to the stream. If you're new or you're watching in, don't forget to say hello. Got my new light, which is blinding me at the same time lighting me up, so we'll see how that works out in this new stream. Nope, don't want to turn that off. Professional as fuck here. Drop it down just a notch. So, as I said in the description, on this stream, I'm going to be building building a site counter, but it's using like serverless technology. It is, I wouldn't even say highly influenced by a blog post I read recently. It's a very carbon copy of a guy, Josh Comieux. I can't pronounce his name, but I'll drop a link into the channel. So we're going to be going along building out this site counter. So like, if you're like me and you're old and you've been on tech for a while, you've probably one of your first websites or first projects that had like a little counter at the bottom of the site that showed like how many visitors had come to your web page, and it was always like the kind of, you know, the bragging rights of I've had so many visitors. And this is before the days of Google Analytics, and these are tools that like can like detect and do analytics on your website and what you're doing. So we're going to try and build that, but a modern / retro version of it. Retro in the way that it looks and feels, but using modern tech behind the scenes. So it's going to be using like serverless technology, using Netlify, so using Netlify functions, React, modern JavaScript framework, because all I know is React. But a couple kind of, you know, nods to the old 90s kind of nostalgia feel of it. So going to give it a couple more seconds here and get everything ready to go. So again, shout out if you're watching along. Ask questions, help me fix bugs, mistakes as I go, because I'm going to make a lot of them because we're drinking. Right, beer out of the way, it's time to crack into the ceremonial wine. So if you've not watched long before, you know that I always have a bottle of red wine for the stream, chilled in the fridge. It's sacrilegious, but when you go for it, you'll never go back. This again is a Tesco's Fruity red wine, so I'll get my ASMR on the go. I'll take a little sip. Not bad, not bad. I think at the start it used to taste terrible, but I've now become accustomed to the taste of it, so I think it's all fine. So I'm gonna very unprofessionally flick back to my stream software. There we go. So I'm calling hit counter, visitor counter, tally, whatever you want to call it, but we're going to be using a couple of different tools along the way. So as I was saying, it's serverless, so we're using Netlify to do serverless functions. Lucky enough, we can run this all locally using the Netlify dev CLI. So it's all going to be run locally, but this can be deployed easily to a server and, you know, built and maintained. But Netlify gives us really cool CLI that you can run and build and test all your things locally. So we jump in the code, we have our sample project. If you watched the last stream, I had built one of the streams, I built a serverless application that used Netlify functions as well. And as part of that, I kind of went through the process of setting up the functions. I went horribly wrong where I couldn't figure out how to get the app running. But I've fixed all the kinks from that. So we have a basic React application that was built off Create React App. So this is our kind of main app container. Then we have this functions folder where we have our serverless functions. So these are the functions that run in our serverless environment. It runs locally in this example, but this would run on the Netlify servers. And these are, I guess you can call them lambdas to a certain extent. And then to style things up, we're going to be trying out, which something I've wanted to use for a long time, is 98.css. So this is like bootstrap-ish style sheet that makes it look like a like Windows 95 computer. I think that'll kind of add the nostalgia, and then as well as that, we're going to be pulling in. Right, over here with the other resources. We're going to be pulling in and using this retro style hit counter, built by the same author who actually did the original blog post. And then we need to be able to store this data somewhere in the cloud and make it accessible. So we're going to be using FaunaDB for this. So I've already signed up and set up a FaunaDB, but we'll walk through the steps of how to configure our collection and our indexes to be able to like query and interact with this data. So first things first, we want to turn this more into our 1998 CSS. So if you watched this before, I don't like reading the docs and trying to figure out how things work. But I can see here they have an example of using this with React, which jumps out at me because I want to use this with React. So we kind of got this simple enough example. So it seems to be, as long as we just import 1998 CSS, which is a dependency, so we need to first install this. So run this all through Netlify dev, but we can do npm I install our dependency, and we can see from the index they are just running out HTML, and you just add in CSS classes onto everything. So we're going to follow a very similar pattern for our own application. So I think this is an old project I've used before that has some existing CSS, so we might be dropping a lot of this. I probably should have dropped before. So let's see if that's installed for us. Yep, it has. And then we can run our site again. This will take a few seconds. So you can see it's spinning up and loading a Lambda server, and it handles the redirects for your application. So let's go back, refresh our hit counter. So now it's looking a little bit different. Don't want to show the stream software again. So it's still not up. We've got our fonts. So these are kind of some default fonts I had before. I want to start pulling in some of this 99 or 98 CSS. So I don't think it has typography built in. So I think if I get rid of so if I can get rid of my own styles, let's see what this does for me. So I want to keep the flex because I want to align everything center. I don't want to set any colors. I don't want them in mid. So we're going to default everything for now. Let's see what happens. So we get a very basic hit counter. I kind of like the fact that it has this background, so I'm going to grab that color. So let's copy the clipboard. So we know these aren't needed, and we'll stick with like the plain black color, and we'll drop in that color from there. Okay, so we're getting a little bit better. What else can we pull in? So there's checkboxes, text boxes, slide down. Ooh, we got the title bar, so let's fire our title bar at the top. Now this is annoying where it does it. If you want to complete title bar, we can use these classes: title bar text, title bar controls. I wish it gave you the actual like HTML needed to interact with these, because the minute it doesn't. But yeah, I'm not stupid. I can expect this element, and so let's copy this. So we want to copy the outer HTML, and let's jump into our app. Reformat all this. We got a lot of stuff. Is that what I really wanted? Title bar text. Don't think that copied across the way I expected to copy across. Oh, show code? What? Did I miss something here? Ah, okay, so I'm just blind. So we can copy that across instead of doing that. So that didn't work, did it? What are we missing? What are we missing? Do we have to wrap this in something? So intro, as long as you have that as a style sheet. Ah, we didn't install it, that's why. We didn't import it actually. So import 98 CSS, yes. So now we go back. Yes, we got a title bar. So let's see, let's make this hit counter. Oh, drunk hit counter, because it's Hello Drunk World. Okay, so we've got some stuff here. After title bar, we'll want our actual title counter. I really like to make that wider because it seems a bit narrow because it's just the text. Do we control with our app with? Okay, margin top. Yeah, I think I'll do. So we'll fire that into our own CSS file. So we can add a little bit styles for it. So it should be app.css or index.css. Yep. Okay, so that's applied at first. So we've got it looking well. So now let's look at our retro hit counter. So looking if this is a React component that we can quickly just pull in and use out of the box. So skipping all the docs, let's install it. And while we're doing that, so we can see technically all we need is the hits. Everything else is the defaults, which I think we can live with. We don't really care too much about any of the fancy side of things. It's mainly around the retroness of it. So all this kind of stuff's really cool. So that's finished installing from our app again, and we can then import it. So we'll flick back to our app, pull this in as an import. I kind of like to keep the core imports and my new imports a little bit separate. And that just takes in hits as the only prop. So after this we'll do React hit counter, close that off, and then we need to give it the needed prop. So hits is going to be a number. Yeah, so we'll go for the delete in their example. So let's flick back and see what happens. So we now have that. We need to align that. So we're going to wrap this in a div. And we're going to give this a class called counter. And give it some style. So when I say display, it's going to be flex, because that's all I seem to know when it comes to CSS style. And direction is column. Yeah. Flex column. And then content center. We'll see if that works. It rarely does. So we've got our counter here. Let's see, what about justify content center? Justify items center? Nope. Align items center. Yeah. So the line item center. If you're like me and you struggle with CSS, you end up just going through the dev tools trying to find the right one to change. Oh, I forgot the A. So you see me looking down, I'm checking on the chat to make sure. So we now, okay, so we now have kind of retro style. There must be some other things we can pull in here. Window contents. Oh, yeah, actually, we want to wrap that in window contents. So what do they do? Yeah, wrap it in window. And that'll bring it actually inside. So it looks like it's going to be an actual little Microsoft window. We'll fix our alignment for this. So what's this look like now? Okay, yeah, that's looking a lot better. We're going to fire some padding on this as well. So, well, padding. So padding, and we're going to say 20 top, 0 left, 20 bottom, 0 right. We have to put in the pixel values. Don't think we can do the pixel for the zeros. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, so now we have a little window, our drunk hit counter, we've got our counter here. At the minute, nothing's really interacting with this. Yeah, it's just a static data hit counter. Let's add in a button and see if we can actually increase our count. So go back to our styles. Let's see, how do we get buttons in? So we'll grab our button code. Thankfully, they seem to have all these things kind of handled out for us. So add in button. I want to move that inside there because I want that aligned as well. We'll do hit me. So what does this look like? We're going to need padding on that, aren't we? So container. This is CSS, so I'm going to have to do dot counter button margin top 20 pixels. I'm picking these pixel numbers out of my head, like so. Hit. So we want, when we click this, this increases. So let's now start wiring this up and connecting this to actual real stateful data and do something with it. So let's jump in and start using React State as we've used before. So we'll do use state. We want to give it, this will be our, we'll call this hits. If I can type, and we say set hits. Okay, that equals use state, and our default is going to be our 1337 because we're late. So now hits becomes our hits value, and we need then to set that value on our button being clicked. So we then can add a button on click event and make an anonymous function that then says set hits to be hits plus 1. So now we can increase our counter. So now we're incrementing our hits, and this could be an actual real hit counter at some point. So that's fine, but when we refresh the page, it goes back to 0. We could then, read the value from local storage. That'll only work for one person. So this is where we want to bring in an actual server where we can actually track hits being triggered as we go. So this is the point then where we want to jump over and we want to set up our, again, I would call it serverless database, cloud database. It's FaunaDB. I've used the likes of MongoDB before, but in the tutorial I was reading, they used FaunaDB. So I thought, yeah, this could be interesting. We'll go for FaunaDB. I've never used it before. I think it'd be a good way to learn again. So in Fauna, when you log in, you're given this kind of dashboard to set up how you interact with all your data. So first, we want to start by creating a collector. As it says here, collector is FaunaDB's version of a table. So if you've worked with SQL databases before, any kind of data management system, you want to create a table to hold your data first. So we're going to create a new collection, and we're going to call this hits. Ooh, I got some autocomplete from when I tried this before. I'm going to click save. So once we click save, next thing we'll do is we need to create indexes. So indexes is our way of interacting and querying the data from fauna. So if we go to indexes, we can then create a new index. We need to choose a collection, and then for the index name, this is like this is the query almost of how we're going to be searching it. So we want to do hits for site. Because it's a database and it's a table, it's not like a single storage value. So this example could potentially mean one fauna connection could work for multiple sites. They could all be linked to this one fauna instance and be used for counting the hits for all these. And then for terms, so terms of what we're going to be searching against, I think for this we want to stick in something as well. So we want, term is going to be the attribute on the data that we want to search against. So I think the data is going to be structured of the site URL and then the actual like count value. So we're going to say site and then click save. So data.site, click save. So the minute if I go test, it's going to bring back nothing. So if we go back to our collections and we add a new document, this is a kind of cool environment where it allows you to create content on the fly. And from what I gather, Fauna is like another MongoDB NoSQL style JSON structured database. So if I can create my own reference, I can say site, it's going to be called test, and then we're going to have an attribute called count. The count is going to be 1337, and we can save this. So now if we go back to our indexes and we search for site, we get back that data. We get back that attribute that has the information that we want. So that's quite cool. So we've set up our data, and on Fauna, we now need a way to then communicate and connect and talk to Fauna. So the next thing we want to do here is we actually want to install the npm package for Fauna so we can then talk to it through our serverless function. So actually before I do anything, I want to verify that our serverless function is up and running before we try and do anything fancy with it. So we go back to, these shouldn't be class, they should be class name. Even though they were working, but they're grey now for me, so I have to look at them. So with Netlify, you can set up your functions to be anywhere, as long as they're specified in your Netlify toml file, toml configuration, I think we would call it. But we're saying our functions is in source/functions. So any file under any JS file on the functions directory is going to be a serverless lambda function. Basic example here is one that just says hello. So we can see in our code there. I just realized I haven't put on the presenter mode. Say nope, not distractions mode. View presenter mode. So we'll make it a little bit bigger for everyone. Yeah, this is professional. Right, exit distraction free mode, because I like to see that stuff. Ent or presenter mode. I don't full screen things. So yeah, we've got our code here that Netlify functions have an API that where if you write a bit of code that does export.handler, then you provide that a function. So the function takes an event, a context, and a callback. The event is the actual HTTP request that came in to that serverless function. Context, I don't know what it is, but because of the way parameters work, you have to define it. And then callback is the callback function that you can trigger when you want to return back. So you can do whatever you want in here. So we can say console.log test. And actually, if we kill this, npmi console dot npmi console dot meow, or is it console meow? Console dot meow. Yeah, I think it doesn't. What's my package name? npm console meow. That's the dash. So we install this package. We can use this for all our login purposes. So let this run and install. Open up our code editor. I actually need to look at how console meow is used because I can't remember from the last time I used it. So you add it, you import it, and then you can do console meow. Okay, that's fine. So right, this is a node-like syntax, so you can't use import. So we're just going to do require console meow, and then let's see if that overrides it. So now do we have so we've updated this. Let's restart our Gatsby dev server. Gatsby Netlify. I get so confused with Gatsby and Netlify because all I ever do is push Gatsby sites up to Netlify. So does our site still work as expected? Yep. Yep, I can increase the count. So I've already opened another tab. So this is the old response. So if I refresh this, we still get hello world. But now if we look in our dev console, so on our terminal, we now have a little cat printing out what we want. So in the same way, and the beauty about this as well is Netlify's console has like hot reloading built in, so I can say if I type Twitch, and then we'll do hello drunk world. So the command S save, it's going off while reloading. The perils of drinking wine is you get wine in your mustache so much. So that's reloaded. We go back here and you can kind of see we're going to our local host where the site's hosted, and then if we do /.netlify/function/hello, that points to wherever our Netlify functions are. You can proxy this as well in your Netlify configuration, so you can have it instead of being .netlify, it could be API/1/whatever. So you could, make it look like you're going to a real API, and you can version that API, and you can do all the, the professional things you would do. So hello drunk world, and we've got our cat saying hello Twitch. Okay, so we're off to the races. So we've set up our FaunaDB. We've got our Netlify functions working. So now we need to actually start communicating and connecting with Fauna. So we need to talk to Fauna through our serverless interface because Fauna is going to a database, which we don't want to cross origin issues. We can't do this via the browser. You maybe could do via the browser if you did a bit of hacking or run an insecure version of Chrome. That's why we're doing it in a serverless function. So let's go back to this. So we need to pull in Fauna. So const we'll just call this DB. No, we'll call Fauna. So FAUND Fauna DB equals require. What's it? FAUN. Yeah, FaunaDB. So yeah, we import FaunaDB. Now, because the FaunaDB connection is going to be asynchronous, we need to turn this into an asynchronous function. It can't just be the standard, event context callback pattern. So we need to update this. So we're going to make some changes here. So we're going to say make this an async function using the async await operator. In this case, we only need the event because we no longer need the callback. So we make this into an arrow function. So now callback doesn't exist anymore. But because we made this an async function, we just do a return at the end instead of our callback. So we just return what we want as our response from the server. Yeah, it's not being used, that's fine. So let's make sure this still works. So it's been reloaded successfully. And everything's still printing out fine. Responded with 200. We'll keep this up so we can see this hot reloading. So now we want to talk to the FaunaDB. And this is where we can start getting interested with how we manage things. So we're keeping event because if we get to the end and I have time, I'm going to go through like how to read from the actual request itself. But we'll stick with just like hard coding our data. So whenever you're using a database connection similar to like MongoDB or even I guess like SQLite, you need to set up a connection and then wire that to a client. So first we're going to create our client. Client equals new FaunaDB dot client. I imported the right thing. FAUNADB. Yeah, okay. Right. FaunaDB.client. So then we need to pass in our secret key, which I've already pulled down, and I'm not going to stupidly show this, so I need to import our config. So const key equals require, and it's config.js. I'm pretty sure that just default exports it. So then we can say key. So that's now created our client that we can use to interact and talk to the Fauna. I don't know why it's not picking up the fact that client exists. So CLIENT. Yeah, that's right. That should be okay. Again, fire away in the comments, let me know to stop if I've gone ahead of things. Sometimes the chat locks up, or it has a bit of a delay. So just double check and make sure I'm not missing anything. Not that I am, but still. No, we're good. So yeah, so we've created our client, we get our secret key. And we want to have a default for this. Is going to be our default site that we care about. It's going to be test. Let's see if we can pull back our test site. So we want to be kind of safe about what we're doing. So we want to make sure that we're checking our data and everything works. But first, we're just going to try and fetch the data and see what happens. So let's see const. So in these kind of NoSQL databases, instead of having records, you have things called documents, because it's like a JSON object. It's not like a row in a table. So we're going to say doc equals, and this is why we made this in a wait function. So Fauna the calls this, or using promises and async await. And if we do async await, it makes the code a little bit cleaner because it reads down instead of having to do a big nested promise tree. So now we can say client dot query to get our data. And for query, we need to do certain things. So actually, what we missed out is there is a query client for Fauna, so we can do const q equals fa dot query. So we create a reference to the query API. So we dig in this query API. What's it look like? It's a node expector. Wait, what's inside the fauna? It's a default export. Yes, it does export client. There's query. Yeah, so this is like our way of like fetching and querying and talking their data, flying around the place. So over here, so we have our like wrapper for our querying. So then we say query. So now we need to construct this query. So let's see, how are we going to construct this query? We want to use the Fauna API. So we're going to do q.get, which allows us to query something, and then q.match will allow us to then search. And because we create those indexes, we want to then tap into using those indexes. So we can do q.index. And the index is going to be the index that we named it. So if we go back to fauna and look at our indexes, we have, this is the name of our index. So we've got that. And then as part of that, so we're saying match the index value for our site. So this will pull back all the results where site equals that value, I think. So that sets up a query. So let's log this out. So doc.log. I would meow it out, but it would be unreadable probably. So I think this should work. So our site's reloaded. Let's go back to our browser, hit here, and go back to our terminal. Okay, so we can see if they fetch off, yes. So then we've got this data. So our document has data on it, and data is that record that we inputted. So now we could say, instead of body, we're going to return our document dot data dot count. So reload this. Ooh, incorrect response body. Oh yes, so stupidly you need to always JSON stringify the response that's coming out of it. So it always needs to be an object, so we're gonna have to say JSON stringify okay, so now we're getting the count that we put into our database. So we go into our collections, we can see that there. When we edit this, can I say 8 save? So we save that. So now if we reload this, okay, we're getting the value back. So let's then call this onto our React application. So staying in here, if we go to app.js, and for these kind of things, I like using, also of course I like using this, my own library. So npm, let's go to I'll search mine and then find it. So I have a React based wrapper for fetch. So let's see, where is it? Yep, use fetch. This just builds a hook, React hooks implementation around the use fetch API, or around the fetch API. So let's install that. And then we can see the implementation is this, where you call an API, you can pass in fetch options, which we won't use, but it can give you is loading, is error, is data, or is loading, does have an error, does have data. So that's installed. So now we load this back up, jump into our application. I'm gonna have to stress this out the whole screen, couldn't run out of space. So we do import our use fetch. So now we can say const is loading data, because we don't expect any errors. It's a not not production. Excuse me. That's not a production way of think about things. And then we can say use fetch, and then for the URL, it's gonna be the URL for our Lambda we've been hitting in the browser. Because we're on the same port, we should be able to just use this. So now we can say only show only show our hit counter when we have data, and the value is going to be data dot hits. Oh, data dot count. Does 98 give us any kind of spinners? I doubt it. It seems to be very basic. Slider. Yeah, there's nothing kind of funny it would give us, so in that case we're just going to say, I say if it's loading, so it is loading, then button. We could do body inside loading, or yeah, we're kind of screwed. But yeah, we'll just do a span or h1. Yeah, so put in h1 saying loading. So we've got, if it's loading, loading div. If we have the data, then render our data. Remove that blank line. We're fetching that, so we no longer need this. We can just get rid of that. So set hits, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, okay. So our button doesn't need a hit counter. I want to keep the button because I want to use that to call back later to the API. So everything's compiled. Use state is not used anymore. That's fine. So what happens when we refresh this now? Ooh, okay, it did something funky with the loading. I want to fix the styling. I'm a stickler for styling, but I'm shit at it. So loading, right. I want this to fit that loading text. It's nice that they actually put in headings. So I said width of that. I could probably go up to 500 and it would still work for mobile. Yeah, we'll do that. We can work with 500, that'll still work for mobile. So undo those changes. If I go to our index CSS file, make this width of 5. Okay, so if we check the network panel, this is actually going off to our serverless Lambda function and return the correct value. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. One thing I'm actually thinking, based on what I want to do, I don't think using useFetch is going to be the best because I want to be able to call useFetch again. Can you put that inside of an if statement to re-trigger it? Then I build that out as an example. So let's look at the useFetch docs, reporting, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's only really for the first time use. Is there a way to call this useFetch again? I don't think there is, because I don't think I would have built it smart enough, so we might just have to actually use a normal fetch. So back to using React state. So we're going to say use state, and we're going to say const is loading, and set is loading, use state. And it's going to be true by default because we want it to be loading by default. and then we need another state variable, and this is going to be our data. It's going to be set data, and initially that's going to be null. So then we're going to need use effect, because we want to make this call at the start and then be able to call it multiple times. So use effect takes a function, empty array of arguments, because we want it on the initial for now. So use the native fetch for this, which works the same, but we can just tweak it. I think what I hate about the native fetch is I have to do .then response dot JSON dot then again, and then data set data. Whereas if I could pass a parameter to this to say, like, I'm always going to be serializing this into JSON, it would make a lot more sense and a lot less typing. You know, that instead of this. But this can only be called, because there's a hook, it can't be re-triggered as far as I can. You can't put it inside of a use effect. So I can't re-trigger the hook every time. So I kind of have to, like, get rid of my implementation and use the browser's native implementation. If you know of a way how to programmatically re-trigger a hook, it would help. Maybe if you put it in a dependency chain, that would maybe help it. So this should still work. I need to then, once I've set my data, set loading as false. Call this D, because we have two datas. This all should still technically work. Yeah, still pulling back the value. Cool. We're grand. I'm terrible at reading usernames. Scenic Moon, what's your question? Ask away. Right, there's a bit of a lag while we're waiting. I'll continue on. But any questions, fire away. You know, get chatting away in the chat. I think Twitch wants me to, like, meet some standard for people interacting in the chats. So, made our fetch. We've got our data, but this is still a static hit counter. What we want is every time we reload the page, we get the counter to increase. So let's go back to our serverless function, and let's see how we can do that. So we're fetching the data here, but we're not really doing anything with the data. Well, we are doing something with the data. We can give her this doc as well, because we know what that looks like. Let's check, see, make sure the chat hasn't timed out. It can lag out sometimes. So we connect to our database, we fetch our data, and then we return it. But we also want to, as we're fetching the data, increase the data by 1. I know this kind of breaks the rule of, like, we should have like an update function and a fetch function, but like as we're fetching it, that means the users hit the site, so we want to increase it by 1. So let's see, how can we programmatically increase by 1? So we've got our document, so we can then interact with that document. So another asynchronous call for us, and then we can do client dot query, which is kind of weird. Like it query, but it's an actual, it's kind of like GraphQL style API where you do a query where you're actually mutating, but it's still a query per se. So we're going to do a query, and we're using our query shorthand Q. say q dot update. So we have like some operator. So we use the get operator and the match operator and the index operator. Now we're using the update operator, and because we have our document, we can do doc.ref, which is like a reference that Fauna understands and knows. Ref. It's a reference to our reference to that current document that we're talking about. So we're not having to write like a bit of a SQL query to like update data or whatever. So we're going to do update document.ref, and then we're going to update what the data part of that attribute that we want. So for us, it's going to be count. Because we have our doc, we can say doc. So this is going to be the new value. Kind of like if you're updating an object in JavaScript. So it's going to be doc dot data dot count plus 1. So that's going to increment it by plus 1, and then return the value from it. Because this is asynchronous and the document is a reference, that reference will be automatically updated for us. So now if we check everything recompiled, go back to our site, clear this out, make sure there are no bugs. So loading, that should have increased. Did we get any errors? No. Reload. Okay, yeah, so every time we reload, it's increasing by 1. Pretty cool so far, yeah. And if we go into our Fauna DB and we go to indexes and we search for our test site, you can see that is 11347, and this is 1346. So we're actually out of sync. What it is? Maybe we need to then actually say, because this is incrementing here, we don't have the latest increment, so this should be plus 1. Let's log all this out. So that's before we do our update. After we do our update, reloaded. So that went from 46 to 48. So 147, 147, and then it's actually 148 because that's what gets returned. So 148 is wrong. We don't need the plus there. That's reloaded. Those 148 again. 149, 50, 51, 52, 53. That's 54. I think there's some sort of synchronization going wrong with this. It's a bit weird because we're adding it by 1 there. It's 41, 41. Yeah, so that's both 53. So is this 53 there? We've now set to be 54. So that return value should be incremented by 1. So 55, 56, 57, 57. Yeah. So now we're in sync. Okay. So we were just mixing up some of the values. Yeah, so then lastly, like we can wire up this actual hit me button to trigger that force as well. So let's jump back into our React app. Let's extract this out into a function that we can trigger as and when we want. Hit me. Oh, keep missing. So this needs to take a few things, not an array. So we need our set data function reference, and our set is loading. set is loading. So now we can replace this with hit me and set data set is loading, and similar in our button example, when we re-add our on click, we can then say set is loading to be true, because we want to do it while we're fetching the latest data, and then call our hit me function. So let's see, so we got 58, 59. It's quick enough. Let's not trigger the loading function. Yeah, so we can spam it, and it counts up because it's making every call sequentially. We go to our, yeah, that happens. So okay, working well. So the thing with this at the minute is, you know, this is just for this site, and it's a lot for just one whole fauna database collection to be just, you know, restricted to that kind of activity. But because we set it up where the site is the key and we're using test as the key, like, you know, we could change this out to be one source of truth, and you have multiple sites. You then could make one, you know, each request would send off the site as a body parameter or a query parameter, and that would then bring back, and you would have one database holding all the hit counters for your site. Or an example I've seen where each blog post would have a hit counter, and you would use the slug of the blog post to be the kind of unique site ID or key for each of those. So I think we're, you know, we've made something that's useful. It has a bit of finesse to it. It's retro and fun and old. We've used React, Netlify, and Fauna to do our full serverless stack the whole way through. So as usual with most of my streams, I ended off with a little room for questions while I have my celebratory cigarette. And I'll be posting this up on, well, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm posting this up on YouTube, but I'm going to be publishing the site offline, because there's a secret key that I need to hide in the Netlify settings before I can fully integrate and use it. There's a little grey area around, you know, the fauna key that comes from this config. I don't want to commit this to source because the key can then spam my account. You can put it on the process environments for a Netlify deployment, but I couldn't find anywhere how to have it in the process, but also reference it, you know, if it was on a local environment, where I think you have to link the site, which means you have to create the site in Netlify to link back to your local site. But if it didn't have the site created yet, then I don't want to link it to anything. So the whole kind of infinite loop of, you know, fuckery around that kind of stuff. But I think, yeah, it came out well. Like, being able to increase that out, it's quick enough. Like, this is going off, talking to Fauna, gathering this information, and then coming back, which is, you know, coming in at, come on, Chrome. Yeah, we're coming at, like, you know, averaging 300-400 milliseconds. There's a lot more you could potentially do with this. Like, you could have this then also, if you could wire up a WebSocket or continuously poll, you could have this go off, and then, like, as a user is on this site, the, like, view counter would be continually counting up as other users are visiting the site, because it's all based off that site's views, not just that user visiting that site. But a huge thanks to Josh and his blog post to kind of cover a lot of this. You can see that he has implemented this on the bottom of all his posts. No, he's got a little click sound as well for the lights. But it's an interesting way of doing something old school with a new technology. So thanks to everyone who watched along live, and thanks for your feedback.